No subject preoccupies the human mind more than the subject of death. We in the Western world have a very gloomy attitude towards death. We dress in black, we sing morbid hymns, we mourn the dead. We don't speak about death. It's a forbidden subject. And yet it's a subject in which we are all involved. We will all die. 70% of the world's religions have reincarnation as their central pivot. They believe that the human spirit separates from the physical body at death and travels to another world. They also believe that that spirit, that personality, will return to live another life. During this program, we are going to be offering scientific evidence of proof of life after death. Stunning new research. Conventional science tells us that when we're dead, we're dead. It's simply that we can't see the human spirit. During this program, we shall be offering evidence of survival of death. And we will be shining light in some very, very dark corners. We are going to be showing you some very surprising evidence.
Two people that I'm talking to today, I'm sure, will shed a lot more light on this subject. We have today Ron Pearson, who is a scientist that's promoting a new type of physics, a new theory of physics, which connects with the paranormal and makes some sense of it. And to Michael Roll, who has been reading survival after death as a branch of physics, chemistry and mathematics for many years. And Michael promotes the work of Ron Pearson, and we shall be speaking to Ron a little later on. But first I'm going to talk to Michael. Michael, I've got a little flyer in my hand here which says, "Science proves survival." And then we go on, a talk on the new scientific evidence for life after death. How on earth did you get involved in all this?
Well, I came in right from the word go because my mother had made a very careful study of survival after death, reading the work of our great scientists, Sir William Crookes, the pioneer of television, and Sir Oliver Lodge, pioneer of radio, and John Logie Baird, another pioneer of television. And they carried out experiments at the turn of the century, actually proving survival. We've had the experimental proof of survival for over 100 years.
So your mother was
Yeah, she had made a very careful study of it, so she was able to point me in the right direction to the suppressed books. All the books have been published, but suppressed, so my job is dead easy. All I've got to do is point to the work that's been published.
And what sort of gave you this passion to pursue it, though?
Well, my mother didn't brainwash me at all, but she did show me this work, and as a young 16, 17-year-old, I read some of the books, and I thought how marvellous, but I realised if scientists like these pioneers of radio and television couldn't break through the barriers, because they hadn't broken through, very few people know about these discoveries, what chance would a young man of 16 have? So I carried on my normal life in business for 25 years. But in 1980, the missing mathematics started coming through. That's the main reason why Sir William Crookes and Sir Oliver Lodge didn't break through.
But what was it? Why are we not more familiar with the work of these great scientists in relationship to
well, because
survival?
when they actually proved survival by experimentation over 100 years ago, it really upset the establishment. Because orthodox science says when you're dead, you're dead. And they weren't too keen for this to get out, and they managed to suppress it.
Why on earth would they want to suppress that?
Well, because
why wouldn't it be a cheerful thing to communicate that they will survive death?
That's logical. That's a logical approach. But when all the scientific books say that when you're dead, the mind and the brain are the same, they're not keen to let it out to millions because public opinion will sweep them aside. So that's why the experimental proof of survival's been suppressed for so long. And they were able to suppress it really, Alan, because we were lacking the mathematics. The critics said to Sir Oliver Lodge and Sir William Crookes, all right, you've proved survival, but where is this next world? And they could not answer that to satisfy modern science. They put forward the theory of where they thought it was. They said, we think it's another wavelength, like television and radio. It's something beyond our normal physical senses. But they didn't have the maths to back it up.
You said a little earlier on that the mind and the brain were not one.
This is the whole theory of survival. You've got to make a separate mind and brain, because we all know that the physical brain and the body packs in. That's an obvious thing we all know. But we're saying, and the scientists whose work I'm pushing are saying right from the word go, that the mind and brain are separate, that there's a vast universe out there we can't see and sense, and that's reality. That's where we go to. It's not a new teaching, this. It goes right back to Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato. They were the great Greek philosophers and scientists, and they put this theory forward then.
There seems to be a great deal of interest in this subject lately in the scientific sense. Now, I haven't noticed this over the last few years. It definitely does seem to be growing in impetus, so to speak. Is there any reason for that, or is that my imagination?
No, it's growing because, as I said in the beginning, that if these great scientists had failed to break through, what chance would a young 16-year-old have? But in 1980, the missing mathematics started coming through.
How did that come about, Michael? This is what
well, I saw a report in the Times which said that 9/10 of the universe is missing. And I said, bingo, that must be it. That must be the next world that we're missing. I now know, thanks speaking to Ron Pearson, that I had jumped the gun a bit there. But that's what I realised, that the maths was coming through. And once you've got the maths to back up the experiment, then nobody can stop it breaking through, because Dr. Richard Feynman, a Nobel laureate for physics, appeared on the television screens a few months ago. He died in 1988. This was a recording. And Richard Feynman said that if your theories and maths do not match the experiment, then they're wrong. The experiment's not wrong, it's the theories and maths. And up until Ron Pearson coming on the scene, we didn't have the mathematics to back up what was being witnessed at the turn of the century with these great international scientists who proved survival by experimentation. So now we've got the missing maths, and once you've got that, then you're bound to break through the barriers.
Right. What you're saying, in effect, if I'm reading you correctly, is that everybody survives death.
That's what our experiments show, and this is what the mathematics of Ron Pearson shows, that we now know where the so-called next world is. This is what we've been lacking, and that's what
upbeat,
it's terribly exciting. It brings in 1,000 questions, of course, but all I'm promoting is that we've got the experimental proof of survival. We now have the maths showing where the next world is.
Michael, you talk about the mathematics to back up these theories of survival now. What do you mean by the mathematics?
Well,
how do you mean by the tie-up between the two
It was a theory that put forward by Crookes and Logie Baird, the pioneers of radio and television. They put the theory forward. They said, I'll tell you what I think this next world is. It's another wavelength, very similar to our television wavelengths, but at a much higher frequency. That's what they put forward at the beginning of the century. But now, thanks to Ron Pearson's mathematics, we've now got the missing maths and showing exactly where the next world is. It's where Sir William Crookes said it was. It's another wavelength. So the people are around us, we can't see and sense them. You've got to have that medium to act as an interpreter. That's what a mental medium does, you see. Mental mediums like Doris Stokes and Stephen O'Brien stand up and they're interpreters between our physical world and loved ones in the etheric world. That's sublime work, and they've been doing this for years, putting loved ones in touch. Marvellous stuff. And then on the scientific side, we've got to have the physical medium to work with.
Well, the scientific side is what we're going to be discussing with Ron Pearson in just a moment.
That's right, yes.
So according to Michael Roll, we all survive death. And the mystery as to how we survive death is to be found in the physics and mathematics of Ron Pearson, who I spoke to at his home in Bath.
Ron Pearson, Ron, over the last year, I've read an awful lot of your work. Much of it I don't understand. Much of it I find absolutely intriguing. A new view of the universe.
Yes.
Connected with survival after death. How did you get involved in this, Ron? How did you get started on this area? Your work is like a whole to me. It's answering all the questions, and I'm intrigued. So how did you get started on that?
I got started by reading popularizations of science, and I could see that certain problems which the physicists were stuck upon were problems which could be solved by my own discipline, using my own knowledge. And so I started to work on these problems. And one of the difficulties then emerged that gravitational theory didn't fit in with physics. There were two theories, quantum theory and gravitation, and the two didn't match. I found out that I could produce an entirely different approach in which the gravitational theory not only fitted in with quantum theory, the theory of the atom, it actually enhanced the quantum theory. But out of this came survival as a natural thing, and also an explanation for paranormal phenomena. The whole thing integrated itself together.
Can I just ask you how these theories fit in with survival after death? This is what we're discussing today.
Yes. What it shows is that there's a structure of space which previously was called the ether. Now the ether was discredited, and I'll tell you what the ether is. The ether was conceived even before Newton's time as an all-permeating substance which went right through the universe. It connected the planets together, the planets to the sun, and then it connected the atoms together, and then the parts of the atoms are interconnected by this all-permeating medium which was called the ether. Unfortunately, Einstein's theories of relativity were quite incompatible with the existence of an ether, and so it was discredited. Nowadays scientists don't talk about the ether at all, otherwise they discredit themselves, because the ether no longer exists according to modern physics. Now I have to go back and say the ether does in fact exist. It's the major part of the universe. Even inside an atom, the ether is the most important part. What we see as observable matter is only a tiny tip of the iceberg.
Now, the ether used to be, I can remember when I was a boy, the ether was something that was talked about a lot. People referred to the ether, and it hasn't been in modern usage for quite a long time. It's not in common parlance at the moment, the
No.
ether. You're bringing it back.
Yes.
Can I ask you, Ron, where this ether, again I ask this question, you've lost me slightly on the physics there, but no doubt a lot of people will understand. But what I really am interested in today is where this ether fits in to the survival theory that Michael was, or rather the fact in the way that Michael was talking about.
It fits in beautifully.
How do these two worlds interrelate because there's an ether there? That's what we're interested in.
It fits in beautifully because what it shows is that this structure I'm speaking about, this filamentous structure, is very similar to the neural network of the human brain, only it's on a very much finer scale, even though it pervades the entire universe. So it has the potential to become intelligent. It also has the potential to become conscious. As soon as consciousness arose, then what I am saying is that the consciousness decided to create a matter system for its own ends, and it used the waves which it spontaneously generates to create a matter system. It does so by causing waves to implode from all directions and produce a little spike in the ether. This is a subatomic particle, and the whole thing is organised by waves. Now this is very interesting because in quantum theory, particles, subatomic particles, the bits of the atom, sometimes behave as if they're particles, in other words little tiny point masses, and sometimes they appear as waves spread out over a big area. And to this day, quantum physicists cannot explain how this can be. Explanations are given, I grant, but they're all nonsensical arguments, in my view. In fact, the physicists themselves say you cannot use common sense in the quantum domain. I'm saying that this new theory brings common sense back into play and shows that waves make the particles and sort this problem out. So this consciousness in the ether then deliberately designed a matter system so that life could exist of the kind we know. The matter system had to be capable of producing the chemistry, the involved chemistry on which life depends. It all had to be very carefully organised.
Almost like the beginning of evolution, as it were, in that way.
Yes. What I am saying is that a Darwinian kind of evolution took place not at first in the matter at all, but in the ether of space. Before matter ever existed, an evolution occurred, produced a consciousness. Then this consciousness deliberately divided itself into small pieces and then placed it in a matter system which it had created to give it a different kind of experience. It produced an environment for itself to live in.
Ah, yes, yes, that I can understand. And also the ability then on the physical death of the body, that part that's connected to the ether, if you like, would return. Am I right in saying that?
It wouldn't return, it would just be there all the time. What's happened is that the matter system has disappeared. The matter system, the atoms of the brain and the body, that's been taken away and simply leaves the mind where it was before. It hasn't really gone anywhere at all.
But people's experiences of, we can only learn this through mediumship, and perhaps Michael knows more, has spoken to people that have experienced the materializations, or maybe have conversed with people that have come back from the other side. But they come back from the other side, or through the veil, if you like, and talk of another world there, of a life that they live in the afterlife, if you like, or in another dimension, or maybe, in your words, in the ether. Why is it that one gets the impression of a structured world, of another world, if when the physical body dies, as you say, the matter system that you refer to, and the mind remains after the matter system has degraded, does that move into another dimension? Does it go into a new vibration? Or is it experiencing another universe within the physical? That
Yes.
I'm not clear on.
I can explain. I had oversimplified things slightly by saying when the matter system disappears, becomes defunct, that the mind is left as part of the structure of the ether. I was oversimplifying, because just as our own matter system can be created, other systems of matter, which are either like our own or unlike our own, but like our own in that they're made from subatomic particles, they can be made as well, provided they are not tuned to the same matter frequencies as ours is. Then we shan't be able to relate to them. But they can interpenetrate our own without our knowledge, simply because our matter system isn't solid. It looks solid only because our atoms can't interpenetrate each other.
I was trying to really simplify the thing as much as possible for the sake of this program, to think in a different dimension, i.e. passing from one to another. That's all, you know. One is stuck with the idea at the moment that one passes out of the body and into, or through a veil and into another world. That's as much as I understand of passing over, if you like.
Yes, well, that's what I'm saying as well. But I'm saying we don't move into another dimension. You're using the same dimensions, but the particles interpenetrate each other. So it's like, to use one of Michael's expressions, very good simile, if you are tuned into BBC One on the television, you can't see BBC Two.
Right.
But the radio waves which are coming in from the stations are still there, in the same space, but you're not tuned into them. And so you can tune in to, say, the Earth matter system by being alive in this world, discard that overcoat, if you like, and you've got another overcoat made of another matter system. So the mind isn't left stranded just in the ether alone. It can exist in a whole number of different matter systems, and it can simply pass from one to the other.
So we could have a whole range of experiences waiting us.
Right.
In different matter systems.
Yes, I think this...
Vibrating at different...
That's right.
At different speeds.
Yes. Which is very much what the mediums say, and people talk to us through mediums from other wavelengths, say precisely this, that they have different experiences in worlds which are similar in some respects to our own, but unlike it in other respects.
And Ron, you quite early on, you were intrigued when you came across phenomena which you had never seen before,
Oh, yes.
like healing and psychometry and telepathy.
Yes.
And that seemed to whet your appetite to look into. I'm not saying that your new physics was based or stimulated by that, but it fascinated you as a scientist. You wanted to know how they worked, and this does seem to fit in now to your ether or your ether theory, doesn't it?
It was really the other way on. The theory, which started off with gravitation, produced this structured ether as an essential component, and then everybody hears about psychic phenomena, and with the scientific training dismisses them automatically because it's nonsense. But then this theory showed, for instance, that minds could be interconnected through this ether because of this structure. It also showed that a subatomic particle could contain millions of these little tiny networks inside itself. Even this tiny pinhead of the electron we were talking about would contain millions of junctions. So it could contain a memory store. All neural networks are known to have a memory store, and they can learn. And so a little tiny object, part of an atom, could contain a memory store. So I thought, well, I heard about psychometry. This seems to explain it. So it was from the theory was coming out with explanations, which I had automatically dismissed in my earlier life. And I realised then I had to take a closer look at these things, that they could no longer be regarded as ridiculous and be dismissed.
Or paranormal? Or supernatural?
I would say almost every paranormal, every aspect of the paranormal can be explained by physics.
Well, so much for the theory. But what about the facts? And how do we establish a fact with regard to survival of death? I spoke to a man who personally witnessed over 1,500 physical materializations. And after speaking to Tom Harrison, I found myself very convinced that his experiences were valid.
Tom, I understand that you've seen something like 1,500 people which we can say have returned from the dead.
That's correct. That's right, Alan. Yes, over the years. Period of what? About 8 years?
Yeah, and these people they're actually physical beings. They're actual physical people.
Solid.
Solid people.
Quite solid people.
Yeah.
Materialised with ectoplasm or cryptoplasm or teleplasm, different names, but it is a solid material. And they built there and walked out and stood in the middle of the room talking to us, walking round, shaking hands with us. We used to go up and embrace them, and people who we knew, as you would if you met a friend in the room, kiss them. And everybody saw them and everybody shook hands with them.
That's an amazing claim, Tom. Would you describe yourself as a spiritualist?
I was brought up in a spiritualist family, but this phenomena which we're talking about is really not especially linked to spiritualism. It has become linked to spiritualism from years ago, historically, I think, but it isn't anything to do with spiritualism per se. Spiritualism, in effect, is that we live as individuals when we move into the spirit world, which is true. But this phenomena that we get, and meeting these people, we've had guests who are not spiritualists, ordinary people, as I call them, non-spiritualists, who have met these people, talked to them, seen them, heard them. Yes.
So you have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that there's a life after death?
None whatsoever.
And that must have been an incredible experience for you.
Tremendous.
And to have that knowledge inside of you now must be an extraordinary thing.
Well, it makes me what I am, I suppose. It's made me the person I am, knowing that from, 1946 to 1954, 55, that period of time, to every week practically, apart from when my mother was in hospital, but every week to be there to meet 4 or 5 people, different people. Sometimes the same Aunt Ag would come, that's my mother's sister who was in spirit. Yes, it meant that I knew, without any doubt, that we lived on. that we do live on as individuals, and we can return, in inverted commas. We don't bring people back. They want to come and talk to us. It's very much a two-way affair, Alan, this business of communication. It isn't that we necessarily want to speak to them more than they want to speak to us. No, no. They want to speak to us. They, particularly those whose relatives probably knew nothing about it.
And these materialized figures, forms, people,
Yes.
that you knew,
Oh, yes.
would talk to you as I'm talking to you now.
Absolutely the same. Exactly the same. No difference at all. They wanted to come and talk to us.
I'm intrigued by, there's one picture in here that I believe is of your grandfather,
Yes.
and you were telling me that although you've never actually met him,
Correct.
or that you had met him but you didn't remember him because you were too young,
Right.
that he actually materialized one day for you
Yeah.
and invited you to stroke his beard.
That's right. Yes, he built a few times, actually. Grandad did. That was my mother's father, and I, as you rightly said, I didn't know him as such because my mother was living with her parents when I was born at the end of First World War, and he used to nurse me, but he died when I was about 10 months old, I gather. And when he built, and I went over to meet him, shook his hand, and was delighted to meet my own grandfather, who, I'm talking of, 30 years nearly. I was, then, 27, 28 years. And he leaned forward and said to me, "Feel my beard, my boy. Feel my beard." And put his hand up like that. And I went up and just felt his beard. Now, this is all ectoplasm. The whole...
But it felt like hair, and it
This
felt
was
like a beard.
just like a beard. And as I've always said, I give it a tug, just to make sure it wasn't stuck on. No, it was just part of him. And my mother always said that he was very proud of his beard. He used to wash it regularly, comb it, trim it, and he was very proud. And that was typical of him to say, "Feel my beard, my boy. Feel my beard."
Tom, in your conversations with your, let's call them your spirit friends,
Yes.
do they ever indicate that there is progress beyond the level that they are now?
Yes.
Yes?
Oh, yes, very. Yes, and Ag particularly used to talk to us about these things. And as I said before, I think she was a medium when she lived here on the earth, a trance medium and a trumpet medium. And she has told us that at her level now, which is, she said, one step ahead of us, she still makes contact as a medium with spirit people who have progressed to another stage. Because it is entirely up to the individual if they wish to stay close to the earth plane or if they wish to progress in the spirit world. The majority of people who want to stay close to the earth plane are those who have family here still. I mean, a mother who dies and leaves her children. She wants to feel she still has a link with them, a contact with them, helping as much as she can, because she can, from the spirit world, even though they may not realize it. She can still help them. But if all the family are there as a family unit and there's nobody else, then they move on. Not necessarily as a group, but they wish to progress. And I know that my grandmother, one of my grandmothers on my father's side, came back to the circle on one occasion only, and I was told that she had come back from a long, long way. She'd made a very special effort just to come back and see me and meet me like Grandad did, because, again, I hadn't met her, not here.
So you were particularly honoured on that occasion.
Absolutely.
That she made that journey.
She
back.
made that journey specially.
So, Tom, what would your message be to people that are perhaps bereaved or that have lost loved ones haven't had the benefit of this wonderful experience that you've had?
Simple message is, of course, A, you cannot replace the physical loss. That's the first thing. I have had the bereavement of my first wife and of my own mother and of my parents. Big losses. I understand the physical loss, and there are times when I've cried many times because of the physical loss. But let me impress on them that those people are still alive, still around them, still wanting to help them. And it isn't a question of we want to bring them back. No way. They want to come and talk to us. Here you have standing in front of you, shaking hands with you, embracing people that you knew. Here, they're the same people that you knew. That is great evidence. And I'm delighted that over the past 2 or 3 years, there's a resurgence. It is coming back. And there are more home circles developing and coming along with things like trumpet phenomena and materialization, hopefully, in the future. Yes, it's, to me, the people who've lost somebody, don't grieve. Grieving only stops your spirit friends and your relative from progressing. It upsets them. Think of them as having just lost a body, and often losing a body which is racked with pain, which is useless. Well, is it not better that they've lost that body, free from that pain, and are living in a spirit world which is light, which is happy?
And which presumably they will join them
in due course.
In due course.
That's right.
Tom, thank you very much indeed for that message of encouragement and hope. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Another incredible story of materialization, which should bring great comfort and warmth to anybody that's bereaved, and in particular somebody that has actually lost a child, comes from Elf and Gwen Byrne, who lost their son Russell when he was 9 years of age. I'll let Gwen tell her own story.
Gwen, thank you for inviting me to your home today, and what an amazing story you have to tell. It's all contained in your own book, Russell, but in your own words, how did it all begin?
Well, it began in 1963, 14th of August. Russell suddenly passed on with cancer in just a few weeks. And naturally we were devastated, having lost my parents as well at the same time. So after a few months I decided to look into life after death. So I began to search through clairvoyant mediums first. And I did this right up till maybe 1968, 69 roughly.
Did you have a belief in the afterlife?
I didn't know anything about the afterlife at all. I didn't even know the word medium, psychic, anything like that. I had no knowledge of anything. I was brought up without any religion of any kind, I'm pleased to say. And I searched, and after about 5 years I was sure, yes, there was a spirit world. And so I just got on with my life. The other children were there and had to be looked after, you know, and carried on living. And then the most wonderful thing happened on the 14th of August, 1982. I mean, you have to get the exact story from Alf, because he was here when the phone call came. I was at Stansted Hall when the phone call came to say that Russell had come through at a physical phenomena circle, and could he speak to his mum and dad?
Some way away from
yes, about maybe 2 hours away, maybe more, depending on traffic. And so we couldn't go to the following Saturday.
Did you know these people from whom the message came?
No.
So you didn't know anything about it?
No, and I heard of them briefly, but that's all.
So Russell actually gave the information
yes, he gave
himself through the medium that somebody else took down?
Yes, a newspaper reporter from Psychic News.
Really?
And he rang Alf.
Yes. Right.
And that was right on his anniversary, 19th anniversary of his passing.
Good heavens. Yes. Mm-hmm. And he gave the telephone, your telephone number?
Yes.
To the reporter?
Yes.
And this was some 300 miles away from where you were?
Said, could he speak to Mum and Dad?
Good heavens. What happened then?
Well, we dashed up there the following Saturday, and we met the lovely people, invited us in, and I mean, we'd never been to anything like this before. And before we knew where we were sitting in this room, dark room of course, and they were using a trumpet at that time. And he just came towards us, the trumpet, and said, "Hello, Mum, hello, Dad." I forget the exact words, you know, right now at this moment, but he began to sing to both of us, and he sang "Where is Love" from Oliver.
Gwen,
Which
can I just stop you there, because I think people might be slightly confused when we talk about a trumpet. A trumpet is something that's used at these sittings,
Yes.
so that the voice can be carried. Is that right?
That's right, yes. A
Yes.
bit like we use microphones in this world. It's similar, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And he began to sing to us. And he
You couldn't see
also...
anything at this stage.
Pardon?
You didn't see
No,
anything
we
at
didn't
this
see. That
stage.
was the very early stages before the actual independent voice came in. This was trumpet phenomena. And he also gave us a piece of a willow tree. I don't know whether it was our willow tree or anybody else's, but he apported a piece of willow tree about that big.
And that was a physical thing?
Yes, that was the first apport that we had. And I've still got it actually, but it's a bit tatty now. And he sung, I mean, there's a line in the song, is it, underneath the willow tree? You know, so everybody knows this song.
How did the piece of willow materialise? How did it come to you?
Well, it just, I mean, at the time, we didn't know, it just landed on my lap. "That's for you, Mum," he said. And then the whole evening went on. The newspaper reporter was there that evening. And from then on, we went regularly. And it went on from trumpet phenomena to independent voice. And this wonderful scenes of energy that just splashed around the room. Amazing energy.
Now, that's a very interesting point, Gwen, from where this video is concerned. We're very interested in the energy
Yes.
and in scientific explanations for the
Yes.
energy. How did you see the energy? How did it manifest?
Well, it's a bit, the only way I could describe it is a bit like lightning, only no noise, just like flashes. Amazing. And there they are standing there.
So then you had real forms.
But it's so quick, you see. I mean, it's like this almost, a flash of energy, and you see the forms standing there. But this went on for, we went for years. Sometimes I stayed for a week, and there'd be sittings every evening. And then Alf would come up of a weekend, and it graduated into independent voice, where the voices would come just almost out of the ceiling.
So actually this was, as you were going up on a fairly regular basis, so the sort of strength of the sitting and the strength of the medium was increasing.
Oh, amazing.
So you were getting a
Yes.
stronger phenomena every time that you went
Yes,
there. right?
amazing. And then, of course, we had the apport of the Pink Panther, which
the
I
society.
still have, but he's fallen to bits now. And this was when he asked me to form a club for mothers to pass on this wonderful news that their children are not dead. They've just gone on before them. And so this is what I did. But over the years we had the most wonderful experiences. We saw transfiguration, which was wondrous. Materialisation, we didn't see the usual kind with ectoplasm, but we saw the energy. And how can you describe energy? It takes a physicist surely to describe that. I mean, I can't describe energy other than it was like flashing lights.
And let me get this clear. So from there, like this field of energy, it was like a field of energy
Yes.
which was flashing. You actually had forms developing within that.
Well, without actually standing there, you could see the forms standing there. But this didn't happen every night, don't get me wrong, it only happened occasionally. They would say to us first, the spirit people would say, "Now sit still, we're going to try an experiment." And we'd sit still like this, you know, all agog waiting. And then this wonderful happening would occur.
Were there many people at these sittings, Gwen?
Well, most nights when I was there may be about 5. You see, we had to come home every Sunday night. Sometimes I'd stay up there for a week. And then Alf would come up. We went up most weekends. But it graduated from then on into more and more wonderful things.
Tell us about that.
Well, we had times when we had this wonderful opera singer would come and sing to us. And we used to duet together, which was absolutely a wonderful thing that happened. And she would come and hold Alf's hand and hold my hand and sing to us.
Well, did she look physical, or did she, how did she...
Well, when you held her hand, you could tell it was a dainty lady's little hand, and she actually showed us her little dainty toe shoes, little, you know, the sort of thing they wear now. And when you danced with her, as Alf did and my eldest son did, they put her hand on their shoulder so they could sway like this in time to the music, and they could feel her hair and see the gossamer silk of her dress. And she lifted her arms up. In the energy, was all the energy filled with all this lovely lace.
Gwen, do you realise how fantastic this sounds?
Yes, I do.
People are watching this programme. You've experienced this. It sounds fantastic.
It is fantastic. It's wondrous.
How physical did the forms become eventually? How?
As real as you.
As real as me. Now, we've heard this before. We've heard it right through this video, that these forms were as physical as I am.
Yeah.
And that if you held hands, it would be like holding hands with
Yes,
me, or me
that's
holding
right.
hands
Yes,
with
it is
you.
exactly how it was.
That must be such an experience.
It is an experience. It literally blows your mind.
Yes.
You have to be sort of prepared for it, I think.
Well,
I think we were.
You were telling me earlier on about, I think it was a friend of yours that, maybe it was your eldest son, was it?
Yes, our eldest
that
son.
actually attended one of
Yes,
these
he
sittings
attended
and
his first one.
and left the room saying, "What is
Oh
going on
my
in
God, he said, what's going on in there, Mother?
there?" Yeah, that's the sort of reaction.
Yeah, I mean,
one
it
would
literally does this to you at first. But as we've always said, Alf and I, we never ever became complacent about it. We always thought upon it as something really wondrous, didn't we? There was no other way, you know. We couldn't just be complacent about such a wonderful thing happening. And he used to come and sing to us, and we'd have duets together, and he'd be dancing around the room, and he'd be racing around the room in a pair of shoes with luminous paint on them. And so you'd see these little feet running around the room. And he was so funny, Russell. He was funny when he was on Earth, and obviously still funny.
You must bring tremendous comfort to your Pink Panther ladies and gents that have lost children.
Well, this is what I was told to do. He asked me to do this, so I've done it. And I think I do, yes. Yes, I do.
So when did the physical phenomena stop then, Gwen? What?
Well, the last time we went was 1989, and that was the last one. And we'd witnessed wonders over the years. And he came that night as a man, which floored us both, actually. It wasn't this boy's voice speaking, it was this young man's voice speaking.
Which you're suggesting is that
He's grown up.
that in the next world,
Yes.
in spirit,
Yeah.
in the etheric,
Yes.
all these ways that we describe this next world, that he continues to mature
Yes.
as he would have done
Yeah.
on Earth.
But there's no old age. They only reach maturity roughly about 35, I'm told.
Is that right?
When we talked, we asked him.
Yes. Did you ask a lot of questions about that?
Oh, thousands.
Yeah. What was your main impression? What was the impression that you got about the other world which was strongest and clearest?
Well, only in my opinion, it's just another step on from this one, and it's a sort of a similar world, except it's not physical. This is the piece that people find hard to grasp, don't they?
Well, this is again what comes through in the new science of, for instance, Ron Pearson, who we spoke to earlier in the programme, that he's saying that actually these are worlds within worlds.
That's right, yeah, that's what I believe.
And that these worlds could be interacting in this room as we're speaking. It's very,
Yes.
very difficult to comprehend.
It is, and yet
But you've had actual evidence of
yeah, but you need a physical medium for it to happen. This is the problem. There aren't that many around.
and it was very interesting when we were talking earlier, and we're not going to talk about names of mediums and things for fairly obvious reasons, but you were saying that there's no great benefit in this to the actual deep trance medium because they don't remember anything.
Well, they wake up after about 4 or 5 hours in trance, and everyone's excitedly talking about the wonders that have happened, and they've seen nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're just sitting there longing for a coffee.
Yes. Do you agree that the medium really is the person that just sorts out the wavelengths?
Yes, oh
Yes,
yes, they've
yes.
got the chemicals, I believe, but then, see, I don't understand all the scientific side of it, and I'm pleased I don't really, because it isn't my thing.
Yes. And you've written this, your book is entitled Russell,
Yeah.
and you was telling me that's taken nearly 30 years?
I started it in 1964, and I had to wait for the ending. And the last time we were there in 1989, he said, Mum, as a young man he spoke, he said, Mother, I promise you that I will give you the ending through someone, somehow. And he obviously knew that was the last time. And it came through one of my mothers, as a young man explaining about his passing into spirit and what he wanted to do now, his work over there in spirit, with all the gang of young men, mostly young men, his gang. There's only one girl amongst them, two actually.
Something else which is close to my heart, Gwen, that you mentioned that Russell has communicated to you that he's now actually involved in work,
Yeah.
which is centering around explanations for the sort of phenomena which took place.
Yes, he's telling me all about
It's
it.
telling you how
Yeah.
it worked.
I mean, I don't, as I said before, I don't understand it, but to read it is quite interesting, more than interesting.
You don't understand.
I don't
you
understand
the
it at
jargon
all.
he's using at
No,
all.
no.
It's amazing. I mean, you're talking to you're talking to me as if your relationship is still going on with your
Oh,
son.
it is. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's never stopped. It's never gone anywhere, just out of my sight. I mean, your other children move away and marry, don't they? But he's just grown up in maybe like another country, let's put it like that.
That's a lovely way of putting
Well,
it.
it's the only way, really, isn't it? It is another country, but it's just out of our sight.
Can you imagine, Gwen, the sort of comfort that this interview will give to people that have just lost their children or loved ones? And also in your book, Russell, this is an enormous source of strength to people.
Yes.
And I'm really very, very grateful that you've given me the time to talk to you today and share that
Thank you
openly.
very much.
Gwen Byrne, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Alf, you were also privileged to experience this extraordinary phenomena in, where was it? Was it in Manchester?
In the Midlands, yeah.
In the Midlands,
Yeah.
would you say in the Midlands? Yeah.
Yes.
So how did you react to all this?
Well, my initial reaction to it was almost disbelief. I think I have to put it like that. Even though we'd had this wonderful evidence over the years, primarily evidence that Gwen had taken.
This was evidence leading up to
physical
phenomena.
this, but I mean it was in-depth evidence. But even so, I must be honest and say that the hard work, the grafting, was done by Gwen. And I took the phone call late at night.
This was a phone call
from the Midlands.
From the Midlands, that this was the communication from Russell in spirit.
In spirit.
That gave your telephone number, which started this.
They gave the
thing.
telephone number through a series of knocks on the table. That's
How's
how
that
hard
happened?
and how difficult it was to start with. It wasn't a sort of straightforward thing, here's a number from Rayleigh, ring it. It was a case of questions and answers on the table. And the young man who rang me was a journalist, a very well-known journalist, and he said that, I have a message for you from your son. And I said, well, how did you get a message from my son? And he told me that it had been spelt out by a series of knocks on the table. And he said, I have a message for his mum. Would I give it? Well, the conversation started almost disbelievingly, and it went on for probably half an hour, just flowing with the information, and we were invited up to the circle.
Extraordinary thing. You must have felt really weird.
Well, it's more than extraordinary, because you read about things like that. It's like most things, you say you can read about it, but it never happens to you. When it does happen, it's disbelief. I mean, it has to be, because if you think to yourself it's as easy as that, but after a while you think, well, I wonder.
There were, we were talking earlier, and we won't mention names at this stage, but at later let's call them later experiments or later sittings, you actually did have people with a scientific background and bias and position that attended these sittings.
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? And yet they seem to be very reluctant to come forward and actually state that they witnessed these things, as you're telling me and as Gwen has told me and many other people are quite prepared openly to talk about. It seems that it's a no-go area as far as the scientist is concerned at the moment. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, science has to have proof. It was ever thus. I mean, there has to be a formulae for most things. They have to be able to say A plus B equals whatever. And it's understandable. I don't expect... It'll be a while before somebody will stand on a platform. Or I don't suppose anybody would ever do it without proof. But I mean, I looked at it in the old days and I thought, will these people say what we have seen? We could say it because it was part of us. We'd seen something that was unbelievable, if you like. I couldn't expect that any one of these people would stand on a platform and say
And say it, yes.
that we've seen something today that we don't understand, but we know we've seen it. They're scientists.
Yes. The great scientists of the past, like Sir William Crookes and Louis Baird was another one.
Yes.
Sir Oliver Lodge.
Yes.
These people did it, didn't they, to their utter detriment.
Well, they did it, and they suffered.
They were great scientists.
Exactly.
With marvellous inventions, and they were destroyed for daring to say that this phenomena was right and that it did exist.
Well, I don't think they were destroyed so much because they were big men, they were very powerful men, but what they did, they left a legacy that people are now picking up on.
Right.
They were brave people, they took a lot of courage. But I wouldn't go so far as to say where they were destroyed. They left an awful lot behind them.
Yes.
They were able to publish it.
I
Because
really
they
meant
believed
they were socially humiliated.
They probably were
derided,
outcasts
yes.
by their own types, yes.
Despite the fact that they were actually responsible for some of the greatest inventions of our time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's ever thus. I mean, it'll happen again, I'm sure.
Yes. So, what is your feeling about that, Elf? I mean, do you think that the scientific evidence, for instance, which I've got contained within this video, based on the work of Ron Pearson, how long do you think it's going to be before the new idea, if you like, is introduced that we all survive death?
Depends on how much effort people are prepared to put into it. I mean, we're told that behind the scenes there are all sorts of things going on. It's like most things. If you throw a small amount of effort at something, it'll take a long time. But if the powers that be are prepared to concentrate, that's all it needs. An effort, a concentrated effort, by those people who can, if you like, do it. They've got the wherewithal to do it, they've got the ability, they've got the thought patterns to be able to decide if it is or if it isn't. And there's enough evidence, there's enough information.
Yes.
Then yet, time, it can be done.
And a question which I've asked before on many occasions, and like your response to it, how do you feel that's going to affect people in general? The knowledge that we all survive death.
Well, it's going to turn an awful lot of things upside down. I think an awful lot of the Orthodox religion believes that there's another world anyway. The only thing that it doesn't have is proof. It doesn't set out to prove it. The peace of mind it's going to give to an awful lot of people will be colossal, providing it's not like we've always said, Gwen and I, when we've talked about it, if you get blasé about something, then it becomes nothing. You've got to see not so much that it tells you there's a life hereafter, but what are we going to do with that knowledge? Are we then going to be able to link in and use the knowledge that they've got to better our lives here? It's not just a case of knowing. You've got to be able to use that information to some end. That's where the pluses will come.
Right. Alf Byrne, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Well, we have waves that we can see, but in the air above the sea, there are other waves that we can't see. And perhaps one of the problems when we're dealing with the subject of life after death is that we're dealing with wavelengths which are beyond our normal senses. Ron Pearson talks of quantum theory, of wave-particle motions, the invisible world. But our whole world is built upon invisible structures. We can't see them, but all science accepts that they exist. We live by virtue of invisible structures. So why do we find it so difficult to comprehend that we leave this dimension vibrating at a certain level and we pass into another dimension in a spirit body or a form which is vibrating at a different level, which is invisible? I spoke to a man who's made a lot of waves himself during the last few years, David Icke.
Well, first of all, I feel there has been a concerted effort to suppress the kind of explanations we're talking about on this video. Throughout our lives, including my own in my generation, and still today, we are offered basically these two choices between one life and then God judges you whether we go to heaven or hell forever, or we're basically a cosmic accident of evolution with no past, no future, of no real worth, and life's a bitch and then you die. And those two kind of forms of seeing the world are ways of helping to control people. If you can persuade someone that they'll be judged on one life, and actually we know on the criteria on which you're going to be judged, so you listen to us and do as we tell you and you'll be fine, or that this spirit-breaking cosmic accident, what's the point? They're very great ways of control. And I feel that when you look just outside of the public arena, you find open-minded scientists and you find open-minded people who are seeing that these two explanations are not the only two that are possible, and indeed there is another far more credible, which answers many, if not all, of the so-called basic great mysteries of life, which are largely only great mysteries because to answer them would be fatal both for dogmatic, you will believe this religion, and this kind of materialistic science we're talking about. The way I feel it works, and interestingly, increasingly open-minded scientists feel it works, is that everything in creation is the same energy, and energy is consciousness, energy consciousness. So we're looking at creation being one gigantic consciousness, one gigantic mind, of which we are all parts. So we're like droplets of water in an ocean of consciousness. We're individual to a certain extent, but altogether we make up the whole. And this consciousness is broken up into different levels of evolution. And one of the things that because of the programming that we do is when we talk about life after death or heaven, we look up, don't we? You know? I think heaven must be at 30,000 feet or something. You know? And I remember that when the penny really dropped for me was some years ago when someone said to me, you know, these different levels, you know, they're not like chest of drawers. They share the same space. Penny dropped. Started to see how these things work, because in the space that my body is occupying now are all the wavelengths of all the frequencies of all the radio stations, television stations, telecommunications equipments broadcasting to this area. They can't see each other, and we can't see them. To them, to each frequency, they are the only one that exists. But if you get a radio and you tune it to one of those frequencies, then to the radio at that time, that is the only frequency in creation. That is its reality, just as we look around and this is our reality. But if you move the dial on the radio, suddenly another station, another wavelength becomes its reality. And on the level of our consciousness, the thinking, feeling us, this series of energy fields that animates and works through the physical form, the genetic spacesuit as I call it, which we use to experience this physical world. We are tuned at that level at any point in our evolution to one of creation's infinite number of wavelengths. At the moment we're all tuned to this one, so this is our reality. But at the moment we call death, the consciousness withdraws from the physical form and moves on to another wavelength and continues its evolution. And from this perspective, so many great mysteries cease to be so. I mean, from the perspective of this world is all there is science, near-death experiences can't happen. or if they are, there's some weird manifestation of a dying brain to hear some scientist talk.
This is being taken increasingly seriously, though, isn't it?
It is, and it should, because I saw an item on the news that was saying that because resuscitation equipment in the crash areas of the hospitals, the resuscitation areas, has improved so much, more people are being brought back from clinical death, and more people are therefore telling near-death experiences with remarkable, amazing similarity in their stories. And all that's happening when they say, in the period that I was, quote, dead, I was looking down on my physical body and I was seeing the doctors and nurses working on it. That's just the consciousness, the thinking, feeling us, the eternal part of us, withdrawing from the physical shell. That's all that happens on what we call death. There is no death, just a moving on. And from my perspective, our consciousness incarnates into endless life situations.
So you see an evolution going on?
Oh, I do. I think we're on a journey of evolution through experience. I mean, you don't just evolve. I mean, if I sat in this chair forever, I wouldn't evolve. I have to experience. I have to learn from my experience. And as I do, I evolve. And that's what we're doing all the time. And often it's some of the most negative experiences, which at the time, and I've had a few, which seem terrible, you look back and you say to yourself, that was horrible, but I wouldn't change it because of what it gave me. So we're kind of on this journey of experience. But the bottom line is that tomorrow is the first day of the rest of our eternity. That's the worst thing that can happen, is that we leave this physical shell. And from that perspective, far from being worthless, we are unique and vital droplets in this ocean of consciousness we call God or creation. This God, as we call it, is not some guy with a beard sitting on a throne saying, "You have sinned and you shall be punished," or somebody out there. It's actually within us. It's around us. It is everything. It is the consciousness that is expressing itself in all the variety of forms that we see. Obviously, we are at a different level of consciousness to a wall, but the wall is still God at a different level of consciousness. It's still the same whole.
Let me just ask you what may seem to be a rather silly question. How do you think that people will react to scientific evidence of proof of life after death? How is it going to affect people's thinking?
Well, it depends, really. If you're kind of open-minded, it should be something of great joy.
Great comfort.
A great comfort. I mean, we don't die. I mean, what a great starting point. But I feel that some people will go through some emotional trauma. Those who have pinned their self-security to a rigid belief system, be it a Bible, be it a religion, be it whatever, their whole sense of security will disintegrate. And I think that that will be a traumatic time for them emotionally. But when that period is over, they will see the wonderful, joyous reality of it, which is that the divisions between us and the hostility between us that has been engineered and encouraged for controlling reasons, divide and rule, is actually not a natural part of creation at all, and that harmony is the natural part of creation, and that we're all part of each other, and we all live forever, and we're all on an endless journey of evolution. Some people are ahead of some others at some point, and at some point in the future the roles will be reversed. We're just on an endless journey of evolution through experience, and life's much easier than it is, and much more wonderful than it is portrayed.
So, David, from you, a very optimistic message with regard to life after death. For all those people that will be watching this program that have lost people, loved ones, they can be fairly sure that there will be a reunion.
For sure. I mean, one of the common themes of near-death experiences is, as people have left the physical form, consciousness left the physical form, they have been reunited with people they've known before. They're all around us. The only thing that divides us from people who have gone before us, if you like, moved on before us, is a vibrational difference.
Much closer than we think.
Oh, they're here. Here.
David Icke.
All right, Dad.
It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Great
very much,
pleasure.
David.
Thanks very much.
Well, that brings us to the end of this program, which I hope has managed to shine some light into the dark recesses on the subject of death. It's ironic to me that the television, the very medium which enables us to bring this information to you, was pioneered by three great scientists, Sir Oliver Lodge, Sir William Crookes, and Logie Baird. All of these three great scientists carried out experiments into life after death, and all were convinced that we all survive death. I hope this program has helped you to make your mind up.